The protagonist, named Will, is a low-level janitor at MIT. Aside from sweeping the floors every day, he spends his time drinking and fighting with his group of friends. At just 20 years old, he has already been to jail 20 times. However, everything changed just because he accidentally glanced at a blackboard in the hallway. From that moment on, both the CIA and NSA were competing to recruit him. On the blackboard was a math problem. After looking at it, Will secretly wrote down the answer, and the next day, the entire campus was in an uproar. The math problem was set by Professor Lambo to inspire his students. Professor Lambo had won the Fields Medal at the age of 20, which is equivalent to the Nobel Prize in the field of mathematics. However, it had taken him 2 whole months to solve that problem, so how could someone solve it overnight? The professor believed that the mysterious genius who solved the problem was one of the students in the classroom, so he posted an even harder problem on the blackboard. It had taken their entire math department 2 full years to solve that problem. Can you guess how long it will take Will to solve it? The problem was posted at noon, and by the evening, as the professor was leaving for the day, he saw a janitor writing on the blackboard. He quickly went over to stop him. However, his colleagues were already stunned because the answer on the blackboard was correct. This janitor was indeed a once-in-a-century genius. Meanwhile, Will was preparing to head to a bar near the university with his friends, not for drinking, but for picking up girls. One of Will's friends pretended to be a history student and approached a group of girls. However, the girls were also being approached by other guys, and these guys were genuine MIT students. They started asking challenging history questions to try and embarrass Will's friend. But Will wasn't going to let his buddy make a fool of himself. He confidently and eloquently answered the questions, covering all the historical knowledge that the students would be studying next semester. Will proved that the university education these students boasted about was something you could learn for just a few dollars from the library, showing off that their academic achievements were not so impressive. The university students were embarrassed, while the girl was captivated by Will's charm. Before leaving, she even gave Will her phone number, which he casually stuck to the glass to show off his prize. To find the janitor, the professor went to the facilities department and learned that his name was Will, and he had been hired for the janitorial job through a referral from a guardian. A guardian refers to a professional who observes and protects juvenile delinquents. When the professor heard this, he frowned. Sure enough, when he found Will was in court being judged for assaulting a classmate who had bullied him in kindergarten. Will had attacked him on the street. In court, Will continued to speak eloquently, citing various references and leaving the opposing lawyer speechless. Despite this, the judge sentenced him to jail and set an exorbitant bail that Will couldn't possibly afford. This was Will's 10th time representing himself in court. In the previous 9 cases, the judge had shown leniency because Will was an orphan. But this time, Will had assaulted a police officer. Despite his legal troubles, Will didn't care much about going to jail and even called the girl from the bar. The professor decided to bail Will out, but with 2 conditions. First, he had to solve a few math problems, and second, he needed to see a psychologist. When it came to solving math problems, Will was like a fish to water. No matter how difficult the formula, he could figure it out just by looking at the question once. With Will's help, many of the challenging problems the professor had faced were easily solved. Hey, you're really a genius. You keep calling me a genius, but insist on making me see a psychologist. Have you ever heard of a genius needing a psychologist? Will said. So, Will deliberately used crude jokes to tease the psychologists. Out of 5, none could handle it and all left embarrassed. The professor, frustrated, had no choice but to approach the person he least wanted to consult, his former college roommate Sean. Sean wasn't a psychologist, but a psychology professor. The professor knew Sean's skills very well, but why was he reluctant to ask for his help? We'll get into the reason later. Sean initially didn't want to agree, but after the professor's persistent pleas and offers of a meal, he finally agreed to step in. However, as soon as Sean started, he almost clashed with Will. Why was that? It turns out that Will, unable to get a reaction from Sean with crude jokes, intentionally insulted his wife to provoke him. What Will didn't know was that Sean's wife had passed away a few years ago. Though the process was uncomfortable, the result was the same. Will thought he had successfully angered Sean, but to his surprise, Sean was still his counselor. What's more, Sean invited him to the lakeside. "Did you call me to the lakeside just to see the swans?" Will asked. "Turns out you're a bit of a fetishist." "I came here to apologize to you," Sean said. "After a night of deep thought, I finally understood. You've read many famous works and can quote numerous classics to counter any argument I make. But no matter how many Michelangelo's works you've read, or how you might even deduce the color of his underwear from books, you'll never truly grasp the smell of the Sistine Chapel without standing there to see its beautiful ceiling yourself. I have seen it. When it comes to war, you might know Shakespeare's words, 'To the battlefield, my dear friend,' but you've never been close to a battlefield and can't feel the warmth of a comrade slowly growing cold. I have experienced it. And when it comes to love, you might quote sonnets, but you've never held the hand of a cancer-stricken wife for 2 months in the hospital. In the end, these are just things from books. No matter how much you know, if you haven't lived through it, you can never truly understand. I guess your strong defensiveness comes from having been hurt before, so you guard yourself closely. But just as I said, I can't truly understand you through a few psychology books alone. However, if you're willing to talk about yourself, I'm here to help," Sean said. With that, the floor was left for Will. Will was left dumbfounded and sat by the lake, unable to speak. After their next meeting, Sean remained silent as well, just as he had said. After Sean had finished speaking, it was Will's turn. But the result was that they spent an entire hour without exchanging a word. During their fourth meeting, the silence persisted. As Sean was about to fall asleep, Will finally broke the silence. He shared that he had met a perfect girl at a bar. They had enjoyed activities together, like visiting toy stores and candy shops, but he decided not to contact her anymore. He didn't want to tarnish the perfect image he had of her in his mind. Perhaps you're worried about ruining your own perfect image. My wife, when she was nervous, would even fart in her sleep. One night, she even scared the dog awake. She's been gone for 2 years now, but I still vividly remember those little quirks. Because it was precisely these so-called imperfections that made her my wife. Everyone is imperfect. I'm sure that girl from the bar has her flaws, too. But just like a puzzle, it's when the pieces fit perfectly together that they become a good match. Will was greatly inspired. After their meeting, he went straight to the girl's dorm to ask her out. She mentioned she had homework on proton NMR spectroscopy, and Will suggested they go out the next day. Soon after, he visited a cafe, wrote on a napkin while enjoying his coffee, and then returned to the girl's dorm. They had a wonderful time together. Meanwhile, Sean and the professor were on the verge of an argument. The professor wanted Will to start working as soon as possible because he was a genius. Every day Will's talent was wasted, the professor believed, was costing them billions. But Sean believed that Will wasn't ready yet and that he needed to choose his own path in life. While the professor saw Will as a tool, Sean saw him as a friend. However, the interviews were already scheduled with the NSA and CIA, and Will had to attend. But to the professor's surprise, Will had his friend attend the interviews on his behalf. The friend took advantage of the situation, collected several $100s in cash from the interviewers, and left with a flourish. Meanwhile, Will continued his pursuit of women. His girlfriend asked him, "You've never been to school, so how can you outshine MIT's math department?" "Well, I'm a genius," Will replied. "Not only in math, but I could easily outperform the biology department too." She asked why, and Will responded, "Do you know why Beethoven could play the piano perfectly from birth? You can't explain it, right? I can't explain why I can instantly solve formulas either. Maybe that's just what being a genius is." His girlfriend was completely smitten. After their deep discussion about biology, his girlfriend mentioned wanting him to accompany her to California because she wanted to pursue graduate studies. To her surprise, Will flatly refused. Will claimed that he couldn't leave his current life and job because he was afraid of losing his status as a math genius in the CIA and NSA. He feared that in California, he would revert to being a lowly janitor or service worker. His lack of confidence made him unable to overcome this hurdle. To ensure his girlfriend's happiness, he decided to break up with her. When the professor learned that Will had skipped the interviews, he felt deeply embarrassed and angry. In a fit of frustration, Will burned his assignments, which deeply distressed the professor. "I often wish I had never met you. Maybe then I could sleep at night without watching you waste your talent," the professor lamented. Will sought comfort from Sean, expressing that he had no interest in joining the CIA. He felt there was nothing wrong with working at a construction site and admired the dignity of labor. Sean responded, "My father worked as a laborer to give me the chance to study and change my fate. He is admirable, but you have all this talent and a great opportunity, yet you choose to squander it. Go ahead then, go move bricks," Sean said. Their conversation ended on a sour note. Fuming with anger, Will called his girlfriend, berated her, and said he had more construction work to do before hanging up. He then went to the construction site and took out his frustration by swinging a sledgehammer furiously. The friends nearby were shocked, but it was one friend's words that finally made Will see things clearly. The friend said, "Sure, it's great that we drink, fight, and work together, but if you're still doing this in 50 years, I'd kill you. Because you're different from us. You have extraordinary talent. It's like holding a lottery ticket worth millions. The best part of my day is knocking on your door, hoping you're not home, so I can go cash in the ticket. I don't know much about your ticket, but I don't want to see my talented friend waste his potential," the friend added. Will's psychological defenses began to crack. He went to apologize to Sean and happened to overhear the argument between Sean and the professor. It turned out that Sean, like Will, was once a genius. The professor believed that Sean could have easily won the Fields Medal, but he chose to abandon his talent and stay in a small town as a teacher. That's why Sean had been reluctant to meet with Will. Sean, however, did not see himself as a failure. He didn't regret choosing the path he loved. After the professor left, Sean pulled out Will's file and learned that Will had been abused and mistreated as a child, which had shaped his current personality. In front of this big man, Sean repeatedly said, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault." At that moment, Will's emotional defenses crumbled, and he cried like a child. In the film's closing scenes, Will declined the job offers from the CIA and NSA. He drove off in the car his friend had given him, heading towards California. Just as his friend had said, he left without saying goodbye. He only left a letter for Sean. "My experiences didn't bury my talent, but erased the confidence I deserved. I was frightened and grew a facade of arrogance to protect myself. I finally received the reassurance, it's not your fault.